This little hole in the wall serving up amazing, authentic Puerto Rican food came to the rescue, and let's talk about why and how. We were on a family weekend getaway in Mount Poconos, Pennsylvania. Specifically, we stayed at a place called Great Wolf's Lodge, which is kind of a one-stop shop with an indoor water park and other activities for the kids. Dining inside of Great Wolf's Lodge didn't exactly look like the most inspired food. Dunkin' was serviceable for breakfast. The menu at Fireside looked like a glorified Applebee's. And before you get on me, don't get me wrong, Applebee's isn't the most awful thing on the planet, but the prices they were charging were kind of taxing. And I would have been disappointed if it was like Applebee's food at those prices. The buffet at Timber's table seemed kind of reasonable at $35 a person, but there's only so much mediocre Italian-American food I really want to eat, especially when we found kind of a perfect gem Puerto Rican restaurant, less than a 5-minute drive away from the lodge, called El Rincon Caribe. Seriously, if you look at some of these reviews on Google, it's easy to see that people think the food is great quality, and people seem to be speaking to the fact that the food is very authentically prepared. And this is where I tell you about how much I adore Puerto Rican food. I've actually visited the island a handful of times over the past 25 years, and every time I connect deeper and deeper with the cuisine. Whether it's the culture surrounding their coffee, some refreshing cocktails and rum, pastries, or staple island food, I just love it all. My absolute favorite things to eat while in Puerto Rico are carne frita, which is basically pork marinated in garlic and salt and then deep fried, tostones, which are crispy double fried plantains, or mofongo, which is like a puck of smashed plantains that's mashed down and it's covered with either meat or a stew. Really though, I like everything. That's why ordering at El Rincon Caribe was so hard. While I was scrolling the menu on my phone, the owner came around to try to steer us in a few different directions, and we ultimately decided on a few things that we were going to share, in addition to like an entree each. Now with this style food, a lot of it we know is prepared ahead, like the pernil and the rice and beans which Cassie ordered, but because I ordered something that I knew was going to take a lot of time, we got some quick fried goodies to start the meal. The empanadas at about $3 a piece seemed like a really good place to start. Now when you see these, they'll look a little bit kind of like Totino's pizza rolls that you get at the grocery, and that's convenient because they actually offer a pizza version of their empanada. We did skip that on this visit, but I'm kind of curious now. First up, the beef-filled empanada. Inside, a nice juicy stew of pulled beef, really tasty. The pastry is nice and flaky, but on the richer and denser side for an empanada. This is actually really common for the Puerto Rican style. The chicken and cheese empanada is kind of similar to the beef one, where it's kind of a pulled chicken that's made a lot richer and fattier with the cheese. The pastry here was similar but lighter in color. Sometimes when I see these multicolored empanadas, I wonder if they're just adding kind of like a food coloring for their own convenience so that they can tell the difference between them. From tasting these empanadas, the authenticity of everything else coming to the table was very promising, but it was really the acapurria which actually made me feel totally at ease with the meal. Acapurria, and I'm really saying it horribly, I know, my Spanish is rusty. Well, it's a popular Puerto Rican fritter that's made with a mash of either yuca, which is a root vegetable, or a green banana called guineo. You take that mash and you fill it with a beef picadillo. Think like when you make like taco seasoning, that's kind of like a beef picadillo. What El Rincon Caribe serves is exactly that to the letter, and the acapurria is actually a lot heavier than the empanada and definitely greasier, but that's just the way it has to be. These things just retain a lot of oil. The garlicky beef inside of this, I feel, was a little bit better than what was inside the empanada, and that's not a knock, it just is what it is. More stuff came to the table, and it was time to wash some of these fried goodies down with some more fried goodies. We're gonna call this the plantain course, because we hit the plantains really hard. We had to get some tostones for the table and for the ride home. Hey, pro tip, tostones actually reheat great in the air fryer the next day. As simple as these are, they're just an unripe plantain that's deep fried twice and smashed. They were absolutely incredible and kind of essential for a Puerto Rican meal. I actually covered how to make these yourself on the channel here a while back. It's super cheap, so check that out if you want a taste of Puerto Rico for under $1 at the grocery store. Back to the meal, I always like to order some maduros too. This is where you take completely ripened plantains, and they're nice and soft, and then you fry them until they're golden. These are nice little sweet nuggets, almost like a dessert, honestly. But nowhere near as sweet as this Coco Rico coconut soda, which I ironically never tried before. I tend to save my calories for actual food instead of sugary drinks, but I can't lie and tell you that the sip that I took of this wasn't absolutely delicious. Maybe I did go for a second sip. Why do coconut sweets have to be so good? Now my food still wasn't ready when Cassie's meal came out. Like I said, they probably had the pernil, slow roasted pork, and arroz con gandules, which is rice and pigeon peas, pre-prepared. Based on what I saw, her dish was nothing fancy, and that was actually very reassuring. My mofongo was ready, and hey look, a Puerto Rican flag. Speaking of decor, the decor all around the restaurant is purely Puerto Rican and highlights a lot of that Taíno Indian culture and the bright colors that you'll see if you visit the island. Back to the presentation of this mofongo, it looked absolutely perfect. But there are a couple things I need to point out. First, this essentially looks deconstructed. That's probably the first thing you'll think. That's actually not uncommon for mofongo in Puerto Rico. Sometimes they'll fill that plantain base with the meat and the sauce, but usually they serve it all separate, kind of so you can choose your own adventure as you eat through it. I ordered mine with carne frita, and that's where they take garlic marinated chunks of pork and they deep fry the hell out of it until it's nice and crispy. They're generous with the portion, like really generous. It's probably over a pound of meat here. The mofongo itself is like a multi-textured plantain experience. You get some extra crispy bits. Because it's mashed with a giant mortar and pestle, you get some softer, creamier areas in that plantain. Now here's something funny. When I ordered, the owner asked me if I wanted 2 fongo or 3 fongo. And I've never heard that slang before. I honestly thought he was joking with me. And he actually gave me a deadpan reaction that he was actually serious. He told me that's where they mix green plantains with either sweet plantains or yuca. And later on I verified that that's actually a thing. I just never saw it before. I opted not to do that because I've never had a proper mofongo in probably about 10 years. But we need to circle back to this because I do need to try 2 fongo or 3 fongo at some point. The low-key star of this dish was the styrofoam cup with brown sauce on the side. This is their signature garlic sauce, and it's honestly essential for this dish, mainly because the plantain and the meat are fairly dry on their own. They are very flavorful, but also very dry. And that's not a knock, that just is what it is. The garlic sauce brings that moisture that really ties everything together. It's very much like the gravy to a mashed potato. In fact, it's very gravy-like. That's a perfect analogy. Probably the best way to describe it. We spent under $60 here, which is probably about half of what we would have spent if we stuck with a restaurant in the lodge. And the food there, you know, would have been mediocre. I mean, you don't know, but you can kind of assume. You really can't beat a price like that. And even just looking at my dish, $17 for all that food is just an unmatched value. Now, we might have hit a couple of desserts and that ice cream in the lodge at Woods End Creamery, but really not for a while after we finished this incredible meal. We were stuffed. If you enjoy videos breaking down meals and snacks, make sure you hit the like button on this video. And if you want to keep up with my delicious upcoming videos, subscribe now. It's always the hole-in-the-wall places that have the best food, like the time I found incredible Jamaican food inside of a Celtic bingo hall. Click on that video on your screen right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you get out there and you find an amazing meal.